let's just start by making visible sort of who you are, what your background is, what you're up to at present.
Okay. So my background really is I've been in marketing my whole life. I've worked both at consulting firms and also on the client side. I worked at Coca-Cola for 17 years. And the last project I had at Coke was trying to move from a market research department and develop internally. We created something called the Human and Cultural Insights Department. The idea being that every company needs to understand its external environment. And to do that, they believe, often every company knows that the external environment is the marketplace. So they have a market research department. But we also exist in the context of the greater culture. What are the skill sets you need, the people you need to understand how culture is evolving? And then secondly, and even more importantly, is how do you take the cultural insights, combine it with all the financial insights and the marketing insights so that the company can determine what behaviors are the most appropriate, what decisions and strategies do they need to stay in tune with and aligned with culture. My job now that I've left Coca-Cola, I've used them, they've been a client of mine, but also several other companies that are interested in doing the same thing. Let's understand culture, because the role that corporations have within culture is being questioned a lot these days. And so there's a lot of tension there. And it's very basic. If you know more about what those tensions are, if you know about what society's desires and beliefs are, then you as a company can decide which of those narratives that are existing out in the world do we want to be a part of. And by doing so, you become an ally with this overall society, and not like many companies are seen today, which is somebody who is at odds with what society is trying to do.
Wow, yeah. Yeah. So marketing is focused, as you said, on consumers, and you were focused on people as people.
Yeah, that's an aspect of something I like to say, which is it's basic. There's a guy named Joe Brewer who's looking at how evolution principles can be used to guide business decisions, doing some really great stuff with economics. And what I learned from that is we live in multiple environments. Okay, a corporation has a natural environment, so they have to know what's going on with, global warming, pollution, et cetera. They also have a business environment, so they're trying to figure out what they need to know through market research. They have a financial environment, so they've developed this department called finance. But then, if you really look at the org charts for all these companies, that larger environment in which the company is embedded, in which we're all embedded, called society, is also part of your environment. So if you look at all four of those environments, culture, market, financial, and natural, you need to be able to get insights from each of those. And it's a very difficult task, but finding a way to take that disparate type of information, combine it in a way that allows you to make a singular decision. No company is going to have one strategy for each of those environments, but how do they bring themselves to the world so that they exist in a way that allows them to thrive? And this is where a lot of the work of Gene Russell has been working, because that's key concept there. How do you exist in a way where you're an ally and people want you to survive?
Yeah.
And if they want you to survive, they will help you. If they don't like you, you see with today's social media environment, companies can be ridiculed and shamed very quickly.
Yeah, it ain't what it once was with 3 TV channels and only the folks with the biggest budgets could speak, right?
That's right. And so the capabilities are shifting for both corporations and consumers, which is now changing that power relationship. But it also is causing attitudinal shifts. We're seeing a great decrease in trustworthiness, the whole concept of marketing speak. We know there's a lot of research showing that people immediately tune out as soon as they realize that that is not an authentic voice.
Yeah.
So corporations who learned one way of speaking are needing to learn an entirely new way of talking. And that, even the idea of what you communicate, what you say, you have to get it right. But its value itself is decreasing because your behaviors and what you do are actually becoming even more important. And so who you are, what you do, your go-to-business strategies, how do you treat your suppliers, how do you source your materials, these things are becoming more of a marketing effort than they were in the past. They tell the world about your values and your beliefs. And if they align with people, they'll accept you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've got your own firm now, and you're guiding other folks through this new department, like having a new sense-making apparatus.
Yeah, it's difficult because each company comes at it from a different point of view. The primary way is the marketing team comes in and says, we want to do this. But also I've worked with companies through either the CSR program or the sustainability program or HR. HR is becoming an interesting one too, because HR is concerned with internal culture, and they realize if we are going to connect well with external culture, we got to get the internal culture correct.
Yeah.
So the fact that it doesn't exist, you can't go to the business schools and find the chapter on where does the Human and Cultural Insights department sit and what does it do and how does it interact with marketing and communications, guiding the overall business strategy. It has a role in all of those. Every decision that's made in a company can be a better decision when it takes into account what's happening in the outside culture.
Got it. Awesome. So I'll sort of make a visible how we came to meet and the role that you played in having me land within this culture, within this organization, within this community. A few years ago, I think it was something like 4 years ago, a mutual friend of ours, Nancy Giordano, was attending a conference, or not a conference so much. How would you describe Rex?
Rexpedition, it's a group that Jerry Mikowski puts together, and it's a tribe of like-minded people, and sort of the center of gravity is not just simply the person, Jerry, but what he really stands for and what he's been studying for many years, which is the idea of trust. His basic question is, how do I trust you? Or what if I trusted you? And so people are interested in how to communicate trust and its role in whatever domain, whether the public domain, the private domain. We all get together and talk about concepts of identity, trust, authenticity.
Yeah, and actually Jerry played a big role in this as well, because he was also at Jerry's retreat was how I met Nancy. And then Nancy and I hit it off, and we started doing some consulting work together and some gigs with larger corporations and things. And anytime she was in town, we would hang and take the opportunity to chat. And she came for this Rexpedition gathering, I guess. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Yeah, you should meet this guy that I'm staying with. We're sharing. There's a few of us sharing an apartment for the weekend or whatever." And told me about you. He's the global director of human and cultural insights for Coca-Cola. And I'm like, what? Like, what does that mean? Like, okay, so he's like, his job is to study like how the world is and how humans are. Like, that's interesting. And at the time, I had been doing some work with some folks from Pepsi, and I can't remember exactly when that moment was, but I think that might have been the year that I had met Manoj Fenelon, who had a not too dissimilar role at Pepsi, right? He was...
No, very similar. I know him quite well. And one of the interesting things that it sort of comes into the fore when you're doing cultural research versus market research is people tend to say data has value, and I need to hold it close. I don't want others to know what I know. And when it comes to financial data, market data, that's been how we treated it. But in the cultural world, we all live in the same culture. So when I'm saying I'm understanding that the role of women is changing in society, Manoj at PepsiCo is seeing the same thing. And so we can compare notes on that, and we're really not giving away any secrets or trade secrets. The idea that they're looking at that is not a surprise to anybody. It's not a surprise Coke's looking at that. Yeah. And so I find that it's a much more collaborative community when you start to look at who's looking at culture across all different domains. I can talk to somebody at very disparate companies too, not just in the beverage world. I can work with somebody who's working in the automotive world, because guess what? They exist in the same culture that all the beverage companies do.
Got it. Yeah, so I'm a collaboration geek, basically. Mm-hmm. And at that time, my scheme was that I was trying to get you and I think Manoj put in touch with one another so that Coke and Pepsi might collaborate on solving water crises, basically. Various issues with regard to water, because I knew both organizations were passionate about it. And I was like, oh man, what press, you could only... And I came and I asked you, if that was okay for me to make an introduction, basically.
Mhm.
And you had said yes. You know, the word competition comes from competare. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean strive against. It means to strive together. That, you know, racing alongside one another makes us each better. But please, I'd love to make the intro. And it's like, cool. You know, and you guys might have already known each other. I don't know, but there was somebody else who was staying in that apartment, and that was a guy named Arthur Brock. And we
Yeah.
were all hanging out and gabbing, and at some point he started talking about this, like, changing the internet thing. And since that was already what I've been working on for the last 7 years, and had stepped away from running an investment firm to kind of like dedicate my life to that, it was like,
Yeah.
you know, what's that over there? And you said something about that, and kind of the rest is history. Like, here we are, you know, all these years later, and I've been working on this pretty much ever since then.
Yeah, being a collaboration geek, and also someone like you who talks to businesses, that idea about what it means to compete was born out of an observation, which is, if you walk into a group of business persons who have been taught that competition is really who they are, it's a key component of their identity. It is what you are taught to do and to succeed at. You can't walk in and tell somebody, I need you to put all that aside, and instead of being a competitive person, be a collaborative person. And so what I tried to do is just bridge that gap with this little twist on what to compete means. Because if you say, no, you're still going to compete, but I just want to understand competition as striving together, all right? We can all strive together, and it starts to bring up so many more possibilities of collaboration.
Yeah.
Otherwise, those walls, I don't know if you've experienced it, but
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
as soon as you start to talk about that not real business collaboration stuff.
Yeah, they go, oh great, the hippies are here.
Right, right.
That's actually why we had Jared and I had called my company, or our company, Collaborative Advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're trying to do a spin on competitive advantage. And that actually came out of there was a sharing economy conference in 2013 called the Mesh Conference in San Francisco.
Mm.
And I realized at that conference, there were all these people, you know, sort of going, hey, there's going to be this thing. And it was just starting to hit the mainstream, right? Like Airbnb was getting recognized, Uber was getting recognized, but that was kind of it, you know? And then there were all these little projects going, hey, you know, there's a thing here.
Yeah.
And there were people like me who had been working on this stuff for a decade at that point. But it was finding its footing. And I realized at that conference that when this hit the mainstream, people were going to go, yeah, but if we shared stuff, wouldn't that be bad for the economy? You know, is that going to kill jobs? Or, you know, like things like this. And I realized that we were going to need sort of a narrative that cut through that clutter in the same way that big government is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Takes a really complicated argument about what sorts of organizational structures perform best,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes it very simple and visceral. And the basic gist is, yeah, the things that win are not the ones that compete against everything. They're the ones that collaborate best. And so they're able to be more competitive at a whole different scale.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some one of the key differences between market research and human and cultural insights is that you really need to start to read some of the foundational social science, as opposed to all the others, the more math-based finance and market data type of things. And one of the books that comes up there is Peter Turchin's written a book called Ultra Society. It's how war caused human beings to become the greatest collaborators on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this idea that what is it that binds us together? And if you can find that, because right now you see it in just about every news story, you can see some component of in-group, out-group. What is it that says you're part of my group, I'm part of this group?
Yeah.
How do we, because Umair Haque just wrote a blog post in Medium recently about how American society is really going very sadly in the wrong direction. And he's a very keen social, he gets a few things that are a little out there, but some of his social observations are absolutely dead on. And the thing is, it is natural. In economic theory, it is known that Homo economists, the human beings, are natural competitors. But we're also natural, you know, we are selfish, but we're also selfless. And we have to find that balance between trying to compete against somebody, but also cooperating. And I think the American business culture, American culture overall, is skewed too far in the you're not me, you're not part of my in-group, I'm competing against you, you're the enemy, or at least I don't need to be concerned about you. And that idea it's in every society, but it's the balance between competition and cooperation.
Yeah.
A lot, you're in part of the world, European Union is very much further along in the cooperative area.
Yeah.
The idea that Americans just can't get together to offer universal health care, shouldn't you be caring for each other? Well, in America, the thought is, no, actually, you need to earn your own health care. Therefore, it's going to be in the private world.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's shift into the Holochain and Holo host stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Should I do the quick overview?
Yeah,
I'd love
I'd love that. And just personally speaking, I've got, other than working for companies as a consultant with my company Macroforces, I try to preach the word, the gospel of this human and cultural insights. And I love the example that your company represents, that the whole Holo idea represents. And I'm going to be at a conference coming up next week in front of a whole lot of people. And I want to make sure that I understand well enough to be able to portray this idea, because I think getting people excited about it, or at least at this point, beginning the awareness process, is something I hope to be able to contribute to the overall effort.
Yeah. Wonderful. And for the folks at home, what's that conference?
It's called the Front End of Innovation. So what it's going to be, it's a lot of folks who work for large businesses. These are not makers. These are not programmers. So they're not going to want to geek out about it, which is good, because that I wouldn't be their gateway to it if that were true. But what they do need to understand, and why I was asked to speak at this conference, is how is the world changing? And as soon as you start to mention how the world is changing, the business mind immediately goes to, okay, what does that mean I need to do differently?
That's right.
And I wanted to let them know that there's going to be the need for certain behavior shifts by individuals and corporations. But to enable those behavior shifts, we're going to need a whole new set of tools. And there's going to be many, many different new tools. We're already seeing a lot of that happening right now. And the problem is, even the tools that seem to be those that are there to help us cooperate and connect are still not centered on society, on the human. They tend to be centered on either the thing, the technology, or on money, or on corporate interests.
Yeah.
And so if we use the tools that were built for all those different purposes for a more social good purpose, we're going to end up with the same problems. We really do need a new set of tools.
Yeah. And that's where we come in.
Yes.
So we are building tools, but we're building tools because we realized that we needed to build tools. Mm-hmm. That wasn't what we were excited about. We're actually not all that excited about the tools. We're excited about the possibilities that those tools
Of course.
So we were focused, so this is Holo and Holochain. We were focused on how can we enable humans to collaborate more effectively at all scales, right? That when we look out at the world, I wake up and I walk outside and I think to myself, man, the structure is broken. Like the system is broken, like this is not working. And it's not that there's bad guys, right? It's not just Trump's an idiot or the CEO doesn't know what the heck he's talking about.
Those are symptoms.
Yeah. It's structural. And it has to do with the fact that even though it's small groups, we don't concentrate power. Like we go, hey, you want to come have some food? Yeah, sure. And we go hang out together. And they're sort of fluid. Like people come together and they go apart and they're constantly making decisions. They have these very fluid and adaptable sort of ways of working together. When we get to big groups, that's not so much the case. We usually set up some little administration in the middle, and these folks are going to orchestrate a bunch of activity for a ton of other people. And that can have some advantages. It can be really efficient. But it has some disadvantages too. Basically, your company has a learning disability, right? It is bad. because every company has a learning disability, and so do all the governments, because they're all running this pattern where the information has to make its way to the center.
Yeah.
And then the center's got to try to make decisions about what to do. And so that just has less sense-making capacity. It's not actually able to try and learn from experience as fluidly as more distributed structures can. And people talk about flat organizations, and they talk about all these different things, but we think there's actually there's a specific communication pattern involved. And the example that I usually use is a beehive. So you've got a beehive, there's one little bee, he flies off, zzz. He doesn't check, he doesn't take 2 wing flaps and then come back and go, is it okay if I take a 3rd wing flap? And then take a 3rd wing and come back and go, is it okay if I take a 4th wing? And he's not checking in constantly. He's keeping track of his own state. He's making decisions. He's got some agency, right?
Right.
And he's off exploring. And he goes off and he explores. And he goes real far and he doesn't find anything. He goes a little farther. He doesn't find anything. A little farther. And he finds some pollen. He comes back and he does a little dance. And some other bees see him, and they got the directions. Oh, it's over there. And they go and they check out, and they find the pollen. They come back and they do a little dance. And pretty soon the entire hive is harvesting this find that got made. But what happens if that bee that went off and went a little farther and went a little farther didn't find any pollen, and he went so far that he wasn't able to make it back? Bummer. We lost a bee. But life goes on. What happens if the only way to go explore for pollen over there is to have the entire hive go, all right, let's go check it out?
Yeah.
Right? If they don't find pollen, the failure is catastrophic. It's an extinction event.
Yes.
Right? And so we think that this pattern, which we call holographic storage, as much as we call it, that's what it's called, this pattern of each participant holding on to the view of the whole, of what's going on, but always from their own perspective, and they're holding it locally. It's internal to them. This pattern is the key to adaptive capacity because it enables a community to get the maximum amount of learning in context.
Right.
The minimum amount of risk. Right? The only thing that got put at risk was that one bee, or that one bee's time. And at every point along the way, that bee is making the decision, should I go a little further or not? And they're the best one positioned to make that decision. Yeah. And if it doesn't go well, we lost something, but it wasn't a catastrophic failure. So the reason it's called holographic storage is that holograms actually exhibit this property. If you take a photograph and you cut it in half, let's say you were taking a photo of like a bicycle, right?
Right.
Now you have half the bicycle. You cut it again, you got a quarter. I cut it again and again. Pretty soon you're looking at like one little chunk of tire or something, But with a hologram, you cut it in half and you tilt it, and you can still see the whole bicycle. But you just see it from the perspective of this one side. And if you cut it again and again and again, eventually you can still see the whole bicycle, but you're seeing it from the perspective that this little corner here witnessed it from.
Right, right.
But when you combine that perspective with all these other ones, you're able to see, the bicycle, you tilt it and right? And so it's this idea that each part contains the whole, but only from the perspective, from its own perspective, right?
Right.
And so there's some interesting things here. This is how language works.
Yeah, yes. We all carry around our own version of a dictionary in our head. I'm good at this conference or at this presentation I'm giving on Monday. I'm going to be using a word I know everybody knows, authenticity. But what we need to do is spend some time working together to come to a common agreement as to what it means. Because we're trying to coordinate our behavior in that respect. Yeah. And so the downside of holographic storage is that sometimes we have mistakes in communication. Yeah. Right? My mental model and your mental model aren't in alignment. So I said this, you thought I said something, I meant something else. We have a failure, right? But I might notice that failure. I'd say, hey, can you grab the gafurga? And you
look around, you pick up something, and you're like this. I'm like, no, man, the Gefurga, and I point at some, toothbrush or whatever. And
or would you say something like, I'd really like a Gefurga, and I'm supposed to interpret that says, oh, he would like you to provide one to him.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So mistakes in communication are the downside, but through additional interaction, you can increase the alignment between the mental models of the different parties.
Yeah.
Right? You increase the harmony, but it's through interaction. And this is not just true in language. It's true in every context. This
Absolutely.
is true culturally. This is true in terms of bees and the flowers, right? They became better fits with one another through more and more interaction and additional generations. And so there's this dance that starts to happen, and I almost think of it as like resonance, where you'll play a note and then you'll play another note, and these things will sort of find a stability point.
Mm-hmm.
Or you'll hit a bowl and it'll go boom, and it'll make a specific sound, right? It finds its equilibrium. That in complex adaptive systems, and all of these things that we're talking about are complex adaptive systems, through additional dances, you'll get things coming into harmony with one another.
Right.
And that's a pattern. It's also important for things to have to not be perfectly in line, because if they can be not perfectly in line, then we're able to go explore different possibilities at the same time.
This is one of the reasons you're hearing diversity as a big buzzword in business right now. Because when you have a diverse group, and you need to be diverse in the sense of viewpoints, or that cultural heritage that you bring with you, that idea of perspectives, you need a diverse set of perspectives. And I was talking about this with a friend the other day about this idea of, he's a very religious person, and he said, Tom, that reminds me of in the Bible, it talks about, there's a saying that says it's easier to see the splinter in the other person's eye than it is to see the log that is in your eye. And our brains evolved to be able to help each other error correct. We are truly social beings. And so what they're saying with this statement is that I can't really see my mistakes or my errors of alignment as well as you can, and vice versa. And it's through dialogue and interacting that we together make each other better.
That's right. That's right. So it turns out this is how language is held, right? This holographic storage pattern. It's how culture is held. It's why language and culture adapt so fluidly, right? 15 years ago, if you had said, hey, you think you're going to be staying in some stranger's bedroom like once a month at some point? What? You down to let a stranger sleep in your bedroom? What? No, what? No, I've got a spare bedroom, but I don't want strangers.
Yeah.
Fast forward, we've seen some patterns, Airbnb, Uber, etc. And all of a sudden people are getting in strangers' cars. And what happened was that got demonstrated. Some people experienced it. They said, this was awesome. It was better than a hotel. It was half the price. It was, yada, yada, yada. The woman was lovely. They tell their friends about it. Their friends go, that sounds interesting. And the next time they go on a trip, they maybe try it. And just like those bees doing the dance, the pattern propagates.
Yeah.
And it propagates appropriately to the folks who find it useful, and through them to the people they're interacting with. So this is how language works. It's how culture works. It's not yet how digital communication works. And it's not yet how large-scale collaboration works. And so our goal was to enable collaboration at all scales to work in this way by creating the medium of communication that could support that. Our take on it is new mediums of communication enable new forms of collaboration. Imagine trying to run a corporation without writing. The invention of writing enabled us to start organizing ourselves as humans in some very different ways.
Even before that, look at the concept of verbal language. Prior to that, if you don't have a verbal language, the bonobos or the chimpanzees cannot really discuss something that is not present. They can't share a concept in their idea unless they can point to it, or it involves what's currently in their area. Once you develop a verbal language that allows you to think about the future, or remember the past, or talk about possible futures, that medium of communication, as you said, really changed who we are.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to think. I think we tend to go to things like the telephone, radio, TV, those types of communications, of course, the printing press. But what you're seeing today, are you seeing a step change in types of communication that is qualitatively different than these previous modes or mediums?
Yes. And I'll go into why in a second. But I want to stay on the point that you just made about the rise of verbal communication. Robin Dunbar, who's famous for Dunbar's number, 150 people, that kind of stuff. His book, Grooming, Gossip, and the Evolution of Language, is literally about that point. And what he argues is that the thing that drove our brains to get larger and drove our development of language. I shouldn't say drove because that kind of gets it backwards. It's really...
They co-evolved.
It's basically, hey, it was really useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
right.
There was an advantage, right? Like, hey, this guy is able to do this thing, and so he was more likely to survive. That group was more likely to survive. It had to do with how large a group you could live in.
Yeah.
And it was basically humans get pushed out of the forest because we're just not as good in the trees as the monkeys are. All of a sudden we're in the plains. The plains have a higher predation risk. So if you can have a slightly bigger group, there's a big advantage there. And the big advantage, right? The big advantage is that when you see somebody go like that, we have this natural instinctual thing where everything goes to the background and we go, what is it? And because we have that, we're able to delegate our sense making for security purposes to everybody else around us. We can focus most of our attention on what we're doing here. And as soon as somebody jerks like that, whoop, everybody's alert to the threat.
Yeah.
And the more people you have, the better that is. Plus you get all the advantages of being able to fight the thing off, right? Bigger group, etc. But he basically goes, hey, group size was the driver. Bigger group size is better. Anything that gets us bigger group size is better. And he talks about the way that trust bonds were maintained in some other primate groups primarily through grooming, but grooming's really sort of costly.
Yeah.
Time-wise.
Sure.
And once you start getting language-based grooming, things like snake, meaning I just put myself at, or eagle, I just put myself at risk, drawing attention to myself, but alerting all the others, right? When I do something like that, it actually improves the likelihood of the survival of of everybody within the group. It increases the likelihood that the DNA that leads to that kind of behavior gets passed on.
Yep.
Right? And so you have this kind of pattern, again, a collaborative advantage. You can think of it as altruism, as if it was like a generous thing, but it's really a generative thing, that it made it much more likely for the DNA that led that.
Yeah. This is really, for somebody to buy into that idea that you just mentioned, I totally do. You have to believe in the mechanism of multi-level selection. Does this group have a competitive advantage over another group? If you don't believe in and there's some, Steven Pinker right now, very smart guy, is still questioning multi-level selection. But the thought is, if our group is more alert than the other group, yeah, we're probably going to survive. And particularly as two other things happened, one of the reasons that Dunbar's idea of trusting those other people, you can only know up to 100, the average, he had a range, but the average is typically mentioned as 150. Yeah. Do I trust your signals? Because as we evolve this ability to read each other's signals, we also develop the ability to fake signals.
Yeah.
And if somebody gives look over their signal, because they want to divert me from who's behind me, they could take advantage of me. So what Dunbar was saying is you need a certain affinity or association with all these other people so that you will trust their signaling. And groups that tend to get too high split because I only can keep track of so many people and trust their signaling. And one of the biggest problems back then was if you were kicked out or ostracized from the group because you were not trusted, that was critical. So we developed all sorts of lovely mechanisms like gossip, and talk and shaming, so that we could help keep each other's signaling proper.
Yep. And we're dorking out on stuff that's not it's all about Holochain, but it's not about the tech stuff. But
yeah,
I love this, so I'm going to keep talking out on it.
yeah,
I see it in two ways. One, if I show up poorly, if I cheat in some way, but the group is big enough, when I interact with somebody tomorrow, the information didn't get to them that I'm a cheater. And so they don't know to defend themselves against me. And so I can cheat again. And so I can cheat and know that I'm going to be able to sort of operate with relative impunity. A 1 million person city, you see this all the time. You especially see it in places that are tourist meccas where people are coming through and then they're gone, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this very predatory kind of situation that often happens. But the other side is almost more nefarious. It's if I show up well, if I just do an amazing job, tomorrow when I show up, nobody's going to know because it's such a big community that was invisible too. That information wasn't able to propagate across the community. Yeah. It just takes too long, too much time for all the gossip to happen and too much stuff for people to keep track of. And the volume of information to keep track of is exponential. And once it gets beyond a certain size, without additional mechanisms, we can't do that tracking. And Holochain is basically trying to solve that problem. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to solve. We're trying to create the mechanisms that enable the members of a community to pay attention to the signals that are relevant to them and to be able to not only receive those signals, but to then be able to combine them with others and synthesize them, transforming them perhaps, and then republishing them. And so someone else can receive a signal too, but it's a packaged signal. And it's a packaged signal coming from something that they've found trustworthy in the past. And so they're able to delegate some of their sense-making outward. Now, this is like really deep in the weeds technical stuff, but it's actually how ecosystems work. If you think about it, so I'm going to go, again, sort of philosophy, biology, geeky here. Information is always in form. It's in some particular form. Yeah. And we only are able to experience that information meaningfully if we can be transformed by it. So you're experiencing these sound waves because your eardrum is going boom, boom. Your body is literally changing shape. You are being transformed. And when you experience that transformation, you go, oh, I heard some sound, right? We have the capacity to be transformed by different kinds of information. And what we describe that as is the ability to receive signals on a particular carrier, receive fluctuations of bumping atoms, or receive photons, light, right? Or receive Chinese, right? I don't have the grammar for receiving Chinese in a meaningful way. I can hear the sounds, but they don't land in some set of associations. I don't have the internal architecture that takes that and it triggers sets of associations with something meaningful. Yeah. And when we look out at the natural world, we go, oh my gosh, this is what everything does. Not just information systems, but this is how all organisms function. Right. So grass sits there and it speaks some grammars. It speaks carbon dioxide, and it speaks water, and it speaks light. By speak, I really mean receives. It's capable of receiving carbon dioxide and receiving water and receiving light. And it uses those things to generate glucose. It combines the carbon dioxide and the water, and they strip off a carbon atom and combine it with the water molecules, and that becomes literally the plant structure. It grows up mostly out of the air that it's breathing in. And then it breathes out the O2 that was left off, right? So basically you have in form, the forms that are coming in are the water and the carbon dioxide and the light. And the form that's going out is the O2 and the glucose, right?
I'm going to try, I'm going to try to just, go ahead.
All right, the last bit is a cow comes along and it eats the grass. Right. It doesn't have the ability to turn carbon dioxide into food. It doesn't have the ability to turn light into food, but it can totally turn grass into milk and beef and bone and blood. And when it breathes in the oxygen, it then breathes out CO2. Yeah. And so you have these different organisms that are taking in inputs, transforming them, producing outputs, and you actually have to have a diversity of forms. Right. In order to have a regenerative system, because if you just had cows and no grass, cows are going to starve right away.
Right.
But if you just had grass and no cows, pretty soon the entire atmosphere is going to have been converted from CO2 into O2. The grass is going to have nothing else to eat, and it goes away too.
Yep.
So you need the diversity of forms to transform CO2 into O2 and O2 back into CO2.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we look at that and we go, oh my gosh, this is how nature does it.
Mm-hmm.
And the key is that each of those organisms internally defines which grammars it speaks. It goes, okay, I'm going to hold the capacity for receiving that CO2. I'm going to hold the capacity for receiving that water. I'm going to do this transformation thing and create glucose. And that's going to produce these. And when that proves useful in a dance with others, it persists.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we go, oh, wow, that's how all these systems work. That's why our bodies at scales way beyond what our corporations are doing, at scales of trillions of organisms collaborating, they're able to thrive, right? But it's because they're making use of this pattern, which is really a pattern of delegation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pattern of going, all right, I'm going to let you do that bit of work for me because I can't do it myself.
Yeah.
But because I found you to be good at it in the past, I'll keep turning to you. And I'm going to probably find ways to make life easy for you so you keep showing up.
Right. and that requires an awareness of the other person's state of mind. And within the human culture, that's important. But it's not a necessary precondition. Getting back to what you were talking about, the bees, a small little detail is that when a bee finds a source of food, that dance they have combines certain types of information, such as what's the direction, how far, but it also contains what's the quality of the food source. And so no one bee knows this, but they do know that when I find a higher quality food source, I dance longer. Now, if say you're just a bee and you encounter not just this one guy dancing, but maybe 2 or 3 other bees dancing, who is going to be seen the most? It's going to be the bee with the longest dance. And so no bee really understands the consequence of that, but the benefit to the entire hive is that the higher sources get the most bees going to them. And it's a very fascinating thing. So the idea that a system can operate without any one individual knowing how you interrelate with each other, but somehow you do, is a really key concept.
Yeah.
And then when you were talking about the photosynthesis in the grass and everything, a brilliant book that I recommend to many people is just Why Information Grows by Cesar Hidalgo. He's a MIT professor. And one of the things he talks about is it's being able to sense the light and the nutrients and everything is one thing, but those are inputs. You need to be able to process them. And so it's that information processing capability that allows them to convert them. And I can see this being an integral part of what you're trying to do with your organization there. How do we get people to sense the right signals, process them with whatever outputs they want, but to have the net effect be a benefit to everybody? And again, Arthur's got a presentation he's got on Prezi called Bessie the Cow or something like that. Yeah. And it's a really nice way of not only demonstrating what you were just saying, but showing the different types of value that come out of systems thinking.
Yeah.
And also one of the most profound points he makes in there is that if you understand a system from only one perspective, you will miss the other sources of value. And I think that's where our business world is right now. We are sensing some forms of value, but not the multiplicity of the different types of value. Right. And it's hard to bring any group to a different place, such as an organization, to the point where they see these other types of value until they have an ability to sense it and value it and feel like it is something that is worthwhile to them.
They have
otherwise you're, as you said before, the hippie from California guy.
That's right. They have to experience it, and they have to experience it as something that was positive, right?
Yeah, and something I would look forward to trying to help. I need to understand this, and maybe you can help me in the future. We can talk about this, but oftentimes these forms of value are either unknown, as we just said, but even when they are known, the payback is in the future. Okay, it's like reputation, right? I need a good reputation, not because it helps me today, but because it will help me in the future.
Yeah.
And the thing is, many of our business decisions are taken with understanding how do I ascribe value on how it's valuable to me today.
Yeah.
And so doing something that has a cost today, but a potential payback in the future, tomorrow, is a very difficult thing to shift the mindset of several. There are certain people who get it. I'm helping start up the Atlanta chapter of Conscious Capitalism. And that tends to be a self-selecting group of people who understand these types of concepts.
Yeah.
If I cooperate well with others, it will come back to me in the future.
So there's something interesting there, which is my sort of hack on this is the Mary Poppins model. A little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is if we can find ways to make it so that the thing that is beneficial for me or us in the long term is also the thing that is beneficial to me in the short term, in some way, then I'll be much more likely to do that thing.
Absolutely.
And a key part there for us, for me, is play and joy. Right? If I can make it so that this is a really joyous experience, I will do things that benefit me in the longer term. And in fact, our bodies trick us like this all the time. We're evolved in a way that leads us to push the boundaries of our skill set, thus improving our skills in that area. And it's not because we're very disciplined and we're very forward thinking. It's because our brains get us high.
Yeah.
When we push the boundaries of our skill set. We have a technical term for this, those of us in the business. We call it play. Right?
Yeah. Before I was at Coca-Cola, the consulting firm I had I belonged to was called Cheskin Research. And Paul Allen had he has a company called Interval Research. And one of his key questions was, why is it more boys than girls play video games? And this is way back in like the early 90s or so. And the thing about working with intervals, I loved it because they were looking at the basic science. They said, look, video games are play. The types of play that we have tend to appeal to boys, but not girls. Why is that? So let's look at the different types of play. And so we really looked at different kinds of play. And now there's many people. Jane McGonigal has really gone deep into this. What's her name? I think it's Lozano. I can't remember her first name. She's gone this. But the gaming world has really done some sophisticated insight into how people play. And a lot of the online learning companies are starting to take these principles because, as you say, if you can't engage, think of the typical child. If he's bored with it, but if you can keep him engaged with it and it becomes more of a play environment, and honestly, that's how we evolved, all right? It all goes back to evolution. How did we learn about the world? You have to sit down and play. I love this idea of the free-range kids and the way we're trying to less structure. Add less structure and fewer rules to our school environments, but still put them in a situation. It's not unguided, but you're controlling the environment to the point where they play in a way that they learn.
Yes. Yeah. And they experience joy in pushing the boundaries of their skill set, finding that edge, losing themselves in the experience. And as a side effect, they learn all this stuff.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've only got a few minutes left before I have to jump on another call, so I should probably do a little more details on Holochain, as is always the case, right?
And you should also try to find some time to sleep, but go ahead.
I know. So Holochain, because this is our goal, because we're trying to enable this much more fluid, much more adaptive pattern to be played, basically, by individuals with one another, it's really important for us to do something that we call mutual sovereignty, which is basically, hey, I want to play the game this way, and you want to play the game this way. Cool. Then we can play the game that way. We shouldn't need someone else going, yeah, I'm also all right with letting you two talk that way to one another, right? But the way the web works today, that's exactly how it's structured, right? When I speak to you on Facebook, I don't speak to you, I speak to Facebook, and then Facebook passes it to you. When you respond to me, you respond not to me, but to Facebook, because there always has to be a web server in the middle.
Yes.
Right? And that's not free. That costs them money. So they have to have some business model. Their business model needs to make sense, right? And so just for the privilege of passing notes, they need some way to pay the bills. And so they're only going to be willing to support us communicating in ways that work for them in addition to working for us, right? And guess what? They're not very good at sensing when this is not working for us.
Mm. Yeah.
You're really good at noticing this sucks.
Yes.
They're not. You're not even the customer for them. You're just the product, right? If they start losing too many users, then they go, whoa, we got to change some things here. But they're not really trying to serve your needs. They're trying to serve your needs well enough that you continue showing up on the site and they can sell your eyeballs to advertisers.
Don't worry, we'll improve our AI to understand when this is not working. Yeah, I'm hearing this. Yeah. That's not going to work, sorry.
Yeah, not going to work.
That's just not how humans interact.
No, but you understand what you're experiencing internally. That kind of sucked.
Yeah.
And I understand what I'm experiencing. And so we might go, let's do a little different dance. Or you might just decide to go do a little different dance with whoever's wanting to do that. If we're doing Twitter and it's 140 character tweets and you go, this just isn't working for me.
Yeah.
You know, I want to do tweets with pictures, right? And anybody else who decides, yeah, that sounds like a fun game, I'll do that too. They can start playing that game with you as well. And we think that this actually shifts. We could think of it as turning the internet inside out, because what happens is instead of having there be an application that is a thing that we go to, that I go to Twitter and then I come back out of Twitter and then I go to Facebook and come back out, we're all feeling like we're being pulled in 1,000 directions at once, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're having to manage all these different spaces. Whereas with Holochain, we're basically trying to flip that around and go, no, pull the grammars that you want to make use of to you and combine them in ways that are useful for you. You got 13 different messaging apps that you're communicating with people through? Cool. Just create a little UI that pulls all of those streams into one so that when you go, Mark sent me a message, Mark, and it searches all of them and pulls that back. Great. Or when you receive something from this thing, you can just go, yeah, drag it into there and it sends it out through another channel. You become the bridge between the different spaces. And you can do those things manually. You can do them in automated ways. So
I see two perspective shifts that are brilliant behind that, actually. Very brilliant. One of them, it goes from a medium or method centricity to a human centricity. What are the intents here? He needs to connect with this guy. It doesn't matter if he's using this program or that program. That's irrelevant. However, the way we've built our systems is very focused on the means and the methods, all right? And then the other thing is getting back to gameplay and the philosophy that's undergirding a lot of this. There was a book in '86 written by James P. Carse called Finite and Infinite Games. And I really believe that what we're seeing is a shift right now from a world that was very focused on finite games. You can't play this game unless you know the rules, all right? But that's a finite game. An infinite one, the rules are less important. The rules will change to accommodate the users. And the goal of the finite game is to win and triumph, like in Monopoly, versus to continue to play, which is a much more of a social construct as opposed to a business construct. And what your example of Twitter, for example, is they were showing adaptiveness, all right? Oh, you want more characters? That's the rules will bend to accommodate your needs. You want photos? The rules will bend to accommodate your needs. If you use that as a principle for your design, you will find that you will eventually become user-centric as opposed to thing-centric.
That's right. And so one of the main ways that we describe our architecture is we are agent-centric. Right?
Agent is I say user, which has got some baggage with it too, but agent is a much better word. Very good.
And we're in people describe us, the World Economic Forum described us as, sort of the next thing, right? The future of the internet kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And this is why. It's because of this shift from a data-centric world, right? There's stuff here, and it's true, or an application-centric world, to a human user-centric world.
Yeah.
And it's because of, like we talked about before, it's at that layer that if you hold the grammars there, and you hold the data there, then you can all of a sudden do the transformations. If you don't hold it there, you can't do you can't take this thing and then turn it into that thing. Right? If the grammars are held over here and the data is held over here, then they don't have control over all of my different domains. They're just occupying this one space. So they're not able to be the bridge. It's only me who can be the bridge. Right? And so it's a huge shift in adaptive capacity and composability. right? So I'm able to like take something and change it. I'm also able to take things and combine them together.
Mm-hmm.
And so we think that we're going to see enterprise folks sort of pick this up because they're being told it's a better blockchain or whatever. But we think that what's going to happen pretty quickly is they go, whoa, the teams that are using those tools are just performing better.
Yeah.
Right. And then it gives them such a collaborative advantage that then it spreads. Then the organizations go, oh, wow. And if you don't start playing the game that way, you go extinct pretty quickly because you're just not able to learn at the same pace.
And one of the key questions I ask in the world of human and cultural insights is why now? And this is I love this shift you're talking about. I love the change in perspective and everything. But if I can't tell myself, okay, why now? Why would this be relevant now? Because I need an environmental change before I can see behavior change, right? And what take for example, are you familiar with the Edelman research on trust? Nobody trusts large institutions anymore, whether it's a government or a large corporation. Trust scores are just going down all across the board. And in that environment, these organizations need to start asking themselves, how can I change my behavior? Because this is not good. And so it's almost priming people for the need to find how can I have governance without government? Because I don't like government. How can I have Facebook without Facebook? Because I don't like Facebook. You know what I mean? How can I connect to everybody, each other? Because I don't really care about the company. What makes Facebook valuable is my friends and family.
That's right.
And what I see you're doing right now is you're taking this angst we have because big has started to concentrate wealth to a point where it's stressing overall society. That's right. And big companies, big governments are really losing their credibility.
Yeah.
But we still want the stuff they provide, right?
That's right. And we want it to be better.
Yes.
And so our worry actually has not been, oh, will there be demand for this? Our worry has been, can we get this out the door quickly enough for it to catch these humans, these societies before they start to collapse? Because those systems are breaking down so quickly. They're just not capable of handling the complexity of the world that we're starting to live in.
Yes.
And so for us, it's like, yeah, there's going to be no shortage of demand, you know, especially with all the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. I mean, this is front and center news every day.
Those are, again, symptoms of distrust of institutions that are essential for maintaining the conditions for cooperation, democracy, everything that makes life good. That's right. You're right. You really do have to hurry.
Yeah. Tom, so amazing. Thank you. This was awesome. And I'm looking forward to another one. I hope the conference next week is incredible. And how do people find out more about your consulting firm? Where do they go?
I don't really even have a website or anything else. So just Google Tom LaForge. Probably the best thing to do is I just share whatever goes through my mind on Twitter.
There you go. All right. Tom LaForge on Twitter. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.